Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into game show night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutiae of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury. Tell Us About Yourself. Conversations with Game Show Contestants is produced in partnership with the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, one of the largest history museums in the United States, and one of the leading museums serving families with highly interactive exhibits and programs. Since 1968, the Strong Museum has been dedicated to exploring the ways in which play encourages learning, creativity, and discovery, and how it illuminates cultural history. And their National Archives of Game Show History. Founded by industry veterans Bob Bowden and Howard Blumenthal, the archive is home to thousands of artifacts representing over 80 years of broadcasting, including props, set designs, video interviews with game show professionals, and other iconic elements from the history of television at play. For more information about the National Archives of Game Show History or the Strong National Museum of Play, visit museumofplay.org or call area code 585-263-2700.
Blue 35.
Tell us about yourself, would you?
Tell us something about you.
For any new viewers, won't you tell us again about yourself?
We've met before, but let's meet again. Tell us about yourself.
What else can you tell us about yourself?
Perhaps you'd fill us in again and tell us about yourself.
I'm Tim Sternberg. I am from Plantation, Florida, which is in South Florida, and I am an education advocate. I advocate for kids with special needs.
That sounds like very rewarding work.
Yes, it's very rewarding. It doesn't pay a lot, but it certainly pays dividends in just, feeling good and doing right. I was a teacher for a long time. I was an administrator, school administrator, and I saw that there was a population of students that were not getting services, could not afford services. So a lot of the work that I do for that population of kids is pro bono. I make my money buying and selling on eBay, collectibles and whatnot, but my true passion is helping kids with special needs.
Well, thank you for doing it. I think somebody has to, and thank you for being one of those people that does it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Tell me about game shows as they relate to you. What role did they play in your life before you had the opportunity to become a contestant on several?
Yeah, oh my God, I grew up as a kid, watching. I was a boob tube kid, a television kid. I was connected to the TV. Mom and dad were busy doing what they needed to do. So, when I was home from school, I would, put on the TV, and I was born in the 70s, so I was really an 80s kid. So on the TV, I would have, The Price is Right, Press Your Luck, Sale of the Century. Those are my favorites, Password, and I would just sit there and watch the shows, and I was enamored by the fact that, here are people just having fun, playing a game, doing something that, they just enjoy to do, and they're making a boatload of money or prizes just doing that. And, I was particularly fascinated with Press Your Luck and with Price is Right, and those were shows that really kind of got my attention. And, there were many times that I was homesick, and that's what I would watch. And when my family could afford a VCR, that's what was programmed, just taping game shows while I was at school.
Sure. And was it the game or the show aspect of game shows that enamored you? I feel like there are some kids that watch things like Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, and then as a result, they love learning, they love trivia, they love spelling, they love words. But then there are shows, like Press Your Luck, like The Price is Right, that aren't necessarily heavy on written material or, intellectual material. It's not, Jeopardy isn't Press Your Luck and vice versa. What about that type of TV enamored you? Was it the game aspect of it or the show?
I think to begin with, it was the show. It was the excitement of, watching people win money and prizes, and, ended up, that ended up being a hobby for me. But the trivia is also an important part of it for me as well. I find myself to be really into, weird facts, and, I used to like to watch. And, when you're a young kid, a teenager, being able to spout out, answers like who the 16th president was, it kind of made you feel good. So, I like to watch Jeopardy, but I wouldn't say that was my best game. So I did enjoy the, trivia aspect of it. Loved watching Wheel of Fortune, solving puzzles, and people shopping for Dalmatians and all of that. But, I enjoyed, just the fun aspect of it, watching someone hit a whammy on Press Your Luck or not hit a whammy. It was a good combination of both, I would say.
Sure. Isn't that a great compliment to get when you're that age, like when you're in school, when they say, oh, wow, he's smart.
Yeah, absolutely.
I always wanted to live up to that. I hope I have. But yeah, hearing that was always great. And it was always in relation, I feel like, to things that were somehow connected to game shows. I was the Jeopardy kid in elementary school. The way some kids today are, into Fortnite or Roblox, I was into Jeopardy to that degree. And it played into everything I did because I was just fascinated with the show. And I liked it because I used to watch it with my dad, and I loved my dad. He was the coolest. And so that all just kind of melted together. I just loved this thing. And like I said, everything in school played into Jeopardy to some degree.
Absolutely. The competition aspect of it, getting the highest score. I used to love in school, for example, winning the spelling bee or doing the spelling bee and doing stuff, that was competitive in nature. And like you said, being the smartest, trying to be the smartest person in the room anyway, from my aspect. But, it offered an escape, I believe, for me anyway. Life wasn't exactly the easiest growing up, and, to watch contestants win boatloads of prizes and trips to far off places that I couldn't even imagine, to me was really attractive, and that's what I loved. And on a show like Sale of the Century, for example, being able to buy a car for $250 after being on several episodes, that was fun to me.
Yeah.
To watch. And I love that.
Sure, it's a fantasy. And I feel like that's what so many game shows are designed to be. They're designed to be an escape from the day to day. And I mean, that's what they were for me as well. I don't know that I would say my childhood or my upbringing was incredibly difficult. It was pretty great all told, but I definitely saw game shows as a way to sort of vicariously be the person that I wanted to be when I grew up. Like watching those people, and I'll talk about the host in particular, but watching them work and watching them do that thing was the best connection I had into that world. Like I could be them through them.
Yeah, I would say I had a similar experience. Absolutely. You felt in the best host, I felt like, brought that out, was able to say, hey, I could do that. I could be that person for that job or for that episode. And, I had no aspiration to be a game show host, but certainly the aspiration was there to do something fun with my life as a career and to realize that that was a possibility.
At what point did you realize that the skills required to have success in the world of game shows were skills that would also translate well into a non-entertainment career? Like, when did you realize that?
I realized that very young. I found that usually the most enthusiastic person in a room can, sway somebody in a job interview and get a job. It's usually knowing different aspects of whatever it is that I was getting into would help excel me in the job. And, I found that, being interested in game shows, it really helped to translate to what I wanted to do as a career, which eventually, and it took me a long time to do it, was to become an educator and be a teacher and do that and be able to give that knowledge to kids and excite them in learning like I was excited in game shows. So everything I did as a teacher really centered around that. A lot of the classroom activities and study guides was very game show based. I was definitely the fun teacher, I would say.
Well, yeah, I mean, game shows are like the perfect tool to make learning fun. And
Absolutely.
That's a great parallel to draw, right? The difference between, or the similarity rather, between being a game show host, and I know you said you didn't want to be one, but being a game show host and being an educator, both of them, right, have that capacity to electrify people about learning facts and learning things and numbers and math and if you answer this question correctly, this is how much you'll have, but if you don't, you'll have this much, and you'll be however many points away from the lead, and just all that info, being that conduit for that information. That's a similarity that I don't know that I ever fully realized until you just started talking about it. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Very much so. Bob Barker could be seen as the teacher, or Jim Perry, or whoever it be. And when you watch even now with Ryan Seacrest coming on, and you could see him in that role, and Pat Sajak, of course, took on that role. I mean, very much so. If you watch episodes of Wheel of Fortune, even of recent, Pat is always the school teacher-ish as the game show host, and he's the leader, and he's electrifying and also setting people in their place when it's need to be. And there is that aspect absolutely of a parallel between a game show host and an educator. 100%.
Pat Sajak, to me, if he were a teacher, he'd be the kind of teacher that would sit on the chair backwards.
Yes, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
See that.
Or like sit on the desk,
100%.
Like one leg up, tossing an apple in his hand. That would be, like, to me, that's the image that comes, him as a teacher, that's the image that comes across.
Absolutely.
After almost 100 episodes of this podcast, I think it's no secret to the people that listen regularly, or people that have hopefully learned something from any of these conversations, that it takes a certain type of personality and a certain outgoingness, a certain energy to be a successful game show contestant. Where does that aspect of your personality have its roots? When did you develop that affinity for being the center of attention, which I think a game show contestant needs to have that to a certain degree?
Yeah, I think I've always been the person that, walked into a room and wanted everyone to have fun, wanted everyone to just be having a good time. And people that were maybe shy or quiet, I would go up to them. That's how I met my wife. My wife is rather quiet, you just walk up to somebody and say, "Hey, how you doing? How's everything going? What's up? What's new?" And just being that, kind of a beacon of light, so to speak, and try to, bring a little happiness into a room. That's always been who I am. And I think you need that to be a successful educator, for example. So as growing up as a kid, I've always kind of had that ability to be that person naturally. And I think that's an important fact. You have to have this naturalness to it. It can't be forced or fake or anything like that. It just has to be who you are. And that's what makes a really kind of successful game show contestant. And I find that's what makes a successful Tim in life. It makes me successful at what I do. A lot of my work is tough, and you have to really bring an air of positivity to what I do, and that's what I do. That's what I try to do anyway.
Sure. Well, you make a good point because it can't be faked. I also would add to that and say it can't be taught. You
Yes.
have to be that kind of person from very early on. I don't know that you have to be born with it. I think some people maybe think that that's just what you have to be.
No,
You
I
have to
agree.
have it from day one. But I think early on you have to have those roots. You know what I mean? You have to. It has to be part of you. My day job is in hospitality, and I'm a front desk manager. And right now we're in the process of training new front desk agents, and it's the same sort of qualities that I look
Yes.
for in an employee. And there is a certain way that people communicate that you can't teach it, but when you hear it, you know it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, and I
Yeah.
think it's the case, from a more practical standpoint, like I'm talking about just like a day-to-day job. But I think even when it comes to contestants, when it comes to hosts, I mean, the confidence that a performer has, I think, in that context is like so easily identifiable, but not so easily quantifiable. You know what I mean? It's hard to explain what that quality is, but I know
What
it.
that it
You know what I mean?
factor. The
Yeah,
it factor.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
exactly it. That's exactly it. When it comes to being, I'll use the phrase entertainer, not that you're an entertainer, but I think that a contestant needs to entertain to a certain degree. Uh, did you have any background of that when you were in school? Did you do any drama, take any theater classes, improv, anything of that nature?
It's interesting you say that. I was never directed in that direction, nor did I personally go in that direction. I think because, at home there was a lot going on to really take the time to do that. However, I will say that, myself, my brother and sister, we used to like put on these fake plays at home. And so there was always this era of, I used to pretend that I was my own reality show before reality shows were a thing. It was like a day in the life of Tim. And, I used to always pretend that I was on this TV show. And so that was, part of my upbringing was just having this pretend kind of play of, okay, I'm on TV. This is who I am. But I never, I love theater. And as a teacher, I kind of participated in some of that with my students. I did Wizard of Oz. But, growing up, that was one regret I had, I believe, in K-12 is not going that route, because I think that would have been something that I really truly enjoyed. But I never kind of went that way.
Sure. Yeah, I did in high school for most of my high school career, and I think that there is no better. I see, and maybe you have some insight into this as well, Tim. But I happen to think that there is no better way to solidify a high school student's personality and help them realize who they are than drama, than theater classes,
Absolutely.
than being in the school play, and just being around those people who are not afraid to express themselves. I feel like it can feel like a lost art sometimes, because especially in high school, like you're always trying to figure out who you are and who you need to be in this situation and who people want you to be. And that's a source of stress. I mean, I know it was for me. It's a huge source of stress at that point in a person's life.
to that point, I think it's also good for those students, like you said, that are kind of trying to find who they are and don't know, and maybe want to come out of that shell. And I've had students, where, we had a drama club and I was the coach of it, and that would come out of their shells. And all of a sudden, I'm like, who are you? Where were you? Where were you hiding? And I worked at a school for students with emotional disabilities, and it really helped them to express themselves in a way that I think they weren't able to do before, and it really did bring them out of their shell. And all of a sudden I'm seeing quite a different person. And to your earlier point, yeah, I think it can be taught. I don't think you need to be born with it. I think everyone has an ability to be who they are. And I think it's also, I think there's variations of personality. I don't think every person, and I'm sure you would agree, not every person who goes on a game show, for example, is, hey, I'm gonna win, blah blah blah. I think you can be that enthusiastic person, but have a different kind of angle to it, and still be that person who is kind of shining a light. And I think that's what makes it interesting, is to have the different types of entertaining personalities that come out on these shows and in life.
Oh, that's a great point. And I think that there is no better example of that than The Price is Right. If you think about the types of contestants that they used to cast late 70s into the early 90s, they, you're right, they weren't all the happy, bubbly, oh my God, so happy to be here kind of personality. Sometimes they'd get like a really crotchety old lady. Sometimes they'd get an incredibly nervous, 30-something woman. Sometimes they'd get, a Marine who just, turned 21, and this is like his first ever game show experience. Like there was such a wide variety of personalities, but they all had that same commonality, which is like they were entertaining. You know what I mean?
Yes.
No matter what they were,
Exactly.
no matter what kind of personality they had, there was something about them that was like, okay, I want to watch this person, and maybe not always want them to win, but you
Right.
want to see what happens. And that's the goal of any game show, right? It's a business at the end of the day. They want, they need asses and seats.
Right, exactly. And I think that's where the host comes in. I think that's the magic of a host, a game show host, is the ability to understand the different personalities and tap into it. I think Bob Barker was a genius with that. I think Drew Carey also. I just think that is like, there's a certain magic to that ability to do that. Pat Sajak did that well also, I believe. Yeah. And that's the exciting aspect of game shows as well.
Oh yeah. And you even, look at it these days. Improv seems to play into what makes a good host a lot more these days. And looking back, it's hard to believe that that improvisational actors, comedic improvisers, weren't looked to fill those roles earlier. I feel like Drew Carey is what, Drew Carey, when he got hired in 2007.
Yeah,
Wow.
2007, I believe.
In a couple years, it will have been 2 decades. That's
I
it.
know.
I remember
was there
that
for his first season.
Yeah. Oh my God. Were you really? Wow.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I went to Price about 9 times. Oh yeah.
Oh, incredible. Well, I remember that period of time, that crossover. I remember like the Vietnam War. That was like that was an unbelievable time to be a game show fan.
Oh yeah, people are like, it's over, Bob is leaving, and who's this Drew Carey, and no one
right. Oh God,
didn't give him a
show.
chance.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Well, you know what? I feel like that speaks to the kind of host that Bob Barker was. I mean, imagine doing a job for so long that once you leave, the whole place shuts down. You know what I mean? Imagine
sustainability.
Right. Imagine being such a good teacher that when you finally retire, the school just folds up. Like that's an unbelievable testament to his talent as a host. But it took somebody new stepping into those shoes to realize that there's a different school of thought, that you can be a good host in a different way. And it took him time to find his feet, sure. And it did. When Bob Barker first started, he had already been on TV for almost 2 decades at that point on Truth or Consequences and other stuff. So it's always an unfair comparison, and he was never going to avoid that. But I forget what point I was making.
And he was a different. Well, you were talking about improv and host, and I mean,
right. That there's that improv-centric kind of school of thought these days. Where like, yeah, of course, like you're working with people who, for the most part, have never been on TV before. They've never played a game on TV before. You don't know if they're going to win or lose. The results are completely unscripted. Of course, you need someone who has a mind for improvisation to be able to switch gears on the fly in front of cameras and an audience and still, keep the show moving.
Yeah, and to your point too, I mean, look how different Monty Hall and Wayne Brady are for Let's Make a Deal, but both of them made the show work for different reasons, and Wayne brings a different aspect to the show with his improv and with his comedic timing that adds a layer to the show that I'm sure fans never even thought of, and that show is going on, I think, like almost 15 years. I think at this point, I think it came out like 2009, 10. But yeah,
I think it's almost run as long. Wait, let me do the math. I think it's run as long, if not longer, than the original version. And that, Let's Make a Deal, perfect example, right, of a show that nobody thought that show would work without Monty Hall. Like, he became so synonymous with it. I had, over the summer, I had the privilege, really, of watching somebody's recording of the final episode of Let's Make a Deal. And it was, and they ended it about 10 minutes early to make this announcement that, the show was going off the air, and they kind of get, he said his thank yous and stuff, and they played a clip of the pilot just to show how far the show had come.
The evolution. Yeah.
Right. And then at the very end, he said, don't worry, the show will be back at some point in the future, and maybe with a new MC. And the audience started booing. It's unbelievable. Like, he was just so, like, inextricably linked with that show.
And he created the show, so yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, who else could you see in that role?
Stephen Hayes, yeah.
That's right.
Monty
they
Hall,
were geniuses.
Yeah. They certainly were. That show, I remember watching that, for example, as a kid, the reruns even, and The Money Machine always got me, where he was rolling out the bills and when it was going to stop. And, I remember all those zonks. And when Wayne Brady came out, I was actually excited because just to see the show back on the air, they had tried it with Billy Bush. I remember a couple of years before that, and it wasn't really successful.
Right.
And so when Wayne did it, it was just magic.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's a whole different. It's the same show, but different enough that it appeals to a whole new generation of people.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about you and your game show experiences. So, I have everyone fill out this sort of application to be on the show, and it's really just so I have some notes to work with and do a little research and stuff. And something stuck out.
What's that?
On yours? So your first appearance, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And the air date was September 9th, 2001.
Yes, sir.
What
crazy,
what an incredible time to be in New York.
Well, the show tape, so the Millionaire was, so I'll give a little background. So Millionaire, of course, was a juggernaut. Around the time that I was on the show, it was starting to kind of cool down a little bit. They initially started with the phone game, and then they started doing in-person auditions for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire because they found that maybe the contestants they were getting were not necessarily what they wanted to have. So I auditioned in Savannah, Georgia, made the show. I got a postcard, and then I flew to New York. It taped July 25th, 2001. So I wasn't in the city when the events took place. I just, the show had just happened to air a couple of days before. But yeah, to be on this high of appearing on national television and winning $16,000 and being with Regis and winning, doing the fastest finger, getting in the hot seat and all that stuff, to 2 days later, like the world just collapsed. It didn't even matter what show I was on. I didn't even care anymore. So, it did for a while take away a little bit of that, and rightfully so. It took away a little bit of that excitement. But yeah, it's crazy, the timing. So yeah, it aired that Sunday night, September 9th, and then 2 days later the events happened as they did on September 11th. Yeah.
And not to dwell on it too much, because I think this is a positive experience, your appearance on Millionaire. I mean,
absolutely,
hopefully it is for anyone who walks away with some money on that show, but I just think about the context. And, like you said, celebrating on Sunday, and of course the day after, and then Tuesday, just everything changes. And I mean, I imagine watching yourself on the show And they made such a big deal about the show being in New York. I mean, I think the Statue of Liberty was the first thing you see in the intro to Millionaire on ABC.
Yeah, and the World Trade Center was in the intro too. Yeah,
Right.
Intro. Yeah.
And so like that to me is linked to an appearance on that show. Like you're not just on Millionaire, you're on Millionaire and you're in New York City. So I mean that.
And I grew up in New York, I grew up in Brooklyn. So,
Right.
it held a special place. And, to just be exactly something as iconic and to realize that, hey, I was literally on the last episode shown before that event happened. And then everything changed, it's crazy. Yeah.
Wow.
It's wild.
There is a piece of, and I will say that I have a fascination, not with September 11th, not with the attacks, not with any of the obscenity of that day, but the media coverage of it. And just
crazy.
How, you look at the events of that day, there was no predicting any of it, no matter how hard the networks tried to predict or rely on eyewitness accounts. And, it was almost like a live game of chess, right? Like watching all the major networks and even like the local stations cover the 9/11 attacks in the way that they did. How do you communicate what's happening in the world calmly and efficiently while it's happening? Like to me, and maybe that's just the perspective of somebody who appreciates good communication. That aspect of it, I'm fascinated with.
Well, I think, to that point, it was rather startling that day, when the event started to come in that, what happened at the World Trade Center and then what happened in Pennsylvania and what happened at the Pentagon. And all of a sudden, things started adding up and it was quite frightening. And I think, the media did a good job of, I think, relaying that in a non-panic, frightening way.
I do.
Lack of a better word.
Oh, yeah. I think of, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with, I'm sure you are because we're more or less the same kind of generation here, but Peter Jennings to me exemplified that. Like that was the man to listen to when everything was going on.
Rest in peace. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Loved Peter Jennings.
Yep.
What a classic broadcaster he was. He very classy, really unbiased view of everything. The way he just plainly talked to the audience and just let it out as it was. I watched a lot of Peter Jennings at that time. Definitely.
Yeah. I remember one thing he said in particular. He said something like, at this moment, it might be easy to feel like the world is under attack, but don't feel that way. You know what I mean? Like to have somebody on TV communicating that way ahead of its time. I mean, you look at Drew Carey, the way he signs off on The Price is Right these days, and we're talking about apples and oranges, I think, in terms of broadcasting situations, but to end each episode by saying I love you to the audience. I mean, 30 years ago, something that would have never happened, masculinity and the image that a game show host, quote unquote, needed to project wouldn't have allowed for that kind of connection. And I feel really grateful to be living in a time when broadcasting allows for that kind of connection. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And without getting, political or anything, but it's just to have that positivity on the airways and just to have that, just someone who's saying, he doesn't know me from Adam, but he's saying, I love you. And Julie Chen kind of does something like that too on Big Brother, where she says something positive at the end. I think that really helps. I think it kind of brings everyone back to, hey, we're humans. Yeah, we're watching a TV show, but at the end of the day, we're all on this rock together,
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think it's easy to feel a little more isolated, especially with everything that's happened the past few years. But
yeah, definitely.
Anyway, Millionaire. Let's talk about. We're going all over the place, but honestly, this is the way I love it. I have no problem with this. I'm not even going to edit this.
Sounds good.
Oh, so I might edit this part out, and I might not. I don't know, but there is there's a piece because you mentioned Regis. There's like a piece of lost media that I know I saw, and I have never been able to find it, but it's Regis on the set of Regis and Kelly, and it's just a couple days after September 11th, and maybe I want to say it was like that Friday. So what was that, the 14th? He was on the set, and it was like a 30-second ad that they only showed on Channel 7 in New York, and it was him delivering instructions on where to turn your antenna on your roof if you can no longer reach channel 7 because they had a transmitter on one of the
Oh,
towers.
wow.
So it was
Yeah,
him
that's right.
instructing you where to turn your antenna in order to get. And I remember him ending it saying like New York is back, and I would love to find that. I have a memory of that in my head somewhere, and I've just never been able to see it since. Because he was another one.
I'll look for it for you.
Yeah, he was another one that they did the show that morning. They went live that morning at 9 a.m.
Yes, I saw that.
It was between the plane hits, and he was incredible at delivering information and letting people kind of look behind the curtain, being a vulnerable sort of broadcaster, which I feel like is what that situation required.
Yeah, you would see Kelly Ripa, for example, being shocked, and she was new to the show at the time, and he kind of just centered everybody and said, "Well, we don't know exactly what's happening." And then the second plane hit, and he's like, "Okay, I see what's going on now." And he kind of just, it was just like dad, watching dad or granddad,
right,
kind of calming you down. So
God, who out there is like that anymore? I feel like there are no more broadcasters.
Regis
like
was a lost breed.
Yes, for sure. He was the last. He was the last of that breed, 100%. Yep.
And I will tell you from my experience on the show, in between commercials, and he was the kindest soul, like really kind, nice, calming. I will tell you, my experience on Millionaire, I started off strong and I got really nervous. All of a sudden you're thinking about all the sounds and the music and everything else, and you hear it, the dun dun, the dun dun. And Regis just in between the commercials goes, "Hey, Tim, you got this. No worries." And he really did help, kind of alleviate, my butterflies, so to speak, a little bit. Being my first game show and being on national television on a show that was still popular. I mean, it was kind of waning a little bit, but it was still popular. It did add up, and Regis was just I cannot say enough how kind and nice he was. Truly.
I am so glad to hear that. Yeah, he was a king for sure. And
absolutely,
talk about a perfect host, right? Because again, we're talking about a show that the host is dealing with unrehearsed, unscripted, relatively untested contestants, because at that point you're still getting on the show not by an interview process but by the fastest finger game. You're calling the 1-800 number and you're playing the playoff game and you're waiting for that call and then the fastest finger, right? You did an audition for Millionaire.
I did. I auditioned. I was one of the first auditions. Yeah.
Oh, well, shit. Rewind that whole 5 minutes. Never
mind. Yeah, I was an audition. I auditioned in Savannah, Georgia. I can never get through that. That phone game was ridiculous. I could not get through on that thing.
My mom tried to get through the phone game, and she made it through like the first round, and they called her back for the playoff, and she lost it then. Because I guess like they take the highest scores for like the week or something, and then they call you and have you play a game against all of them. I guess it's like fastest finger, like over the phone.
I'm going to be honest with you. Like I'm good at trivia. I'm good at, multiple choice, but if you time something, this is why I've always had issues with the Jeopardy test, because the Jeopardy test is 50 questions and you have 20 seconds for each answer and you have to do it quickly and type. And I've never been successful at that, even though I can watch Jeopardy and answer all the questions. So, the Millionaire game was kind of similar. I mean, it required speed and being fast, and I don't know, whenever I'm supposed to be fast, my mind always messes that up because the stress of being fast. So, I don't know. But I happen to win the first fastest finger of my episode.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's excellent. That's excellent. And then you got to meet Regis and sit in the chair and do the whole thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, what an incredible experience. And again, that's, like you said, the show is not at its absolute height of popularity, but popular enough that
definitely
that's a dream come true for a lot of people. I'm sure it was for you as well.
Absolutely. Winning, mind you, $16,000 isn't really secondary, but winning the money for me was secondary because I just wanted that experience. And, I told myself, yeah, I'm going to win the fastest finger. But, there's a lot of factors that go into that. Only 3 or 4 contestants per episode won the fastest finger. You just don't know if, the question's going to line up. Luckily for me, it was about TV neighbors, and television is one of my strengths, and it kind of lined up for me. But, I just have that experience of being there, as in a game show was for me like everything. And so the 16 grand, very welcomed, but definitely secondary to the experience.
Well, judging by your score, you did exactly what I did when I was on the show in 2010. I walked away from that second milestone question because I did
Yes.
not know it. What was the question that you didn't know?
So it was, which of these countries lies south of China in the South China Sea? And geography is not a strong point of mine whatsoever.
Why was a
And I was
geography
out of
question too? Oh
lifelines.
my god.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh my god.
I was like, why?
Traveling from Copenhagen to Stockholm typically requires traveling on one body of water.
Oh God. That I would actually know that only because I've traveled on the Baltic Sea, but yes.
Right.
Wow.
And I had absolutely no idea. And honestly, I was part of the first season that had a clock. I had 30 seconds to answer.
Oh, I remember that ridiculousness.
Yeah. And then I guess if the time runs out, it's a walk away. And that's
Was this Super Millionaire that you were on?
No. This was the syndicated. I was on with
Syndicated.
Yeah, with Meredith.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. We taped in like October. Oh, she was a class act.
She
and
was beautiful.
Oh,
Absolutely.
She was incredible. And I mention this every time I talk about this experience. She sent me a handwritten card thanking me
oh my God,
on the show
that.
in the days after it had aired, the days after it had taped. And I know that I was not the only one she did that for. I suspect that she did that for every contestant that she had. And
well, I know for a fact,
Yeah.
I'm friends with Nancy Christie, and she definitely got one of those. I know, not just because she won $1 million, but yeah.
I wonder if you struggled at all with the feeling of wishing you had gone further on Millionaire.
Oh yeah.
I think that in the days
100%.
afterwards, like in the days afterwards, it tortured me a little bit. I was like, if I had that would have just, you know what I mean? Like I could have just made that one final leap and I would have been guaranteed that money. And it took me a little while to kind of reconcile it in my head. It also didn't help that all my friends in college were walking around calling me Baltic Sea for like the next 3 months afterwards.
Terrible.
Yeah. But
wait, at the time I was in this group. We called ourselves the Gypters because of a question on Million, and it was the ABC message board, and it was a big Millionaire fan base, and I was part of that. And a lot of the people that were in that group, they won $250,000-$500,000, and later Nancy also won $1 million. And so I constantly thought about that, because I was surrounded by all these geniuses. My phone a friend was Steve Perry, who won $500,000 on the show. So I just to be around these really brilliant people and to say, oh, okay, I only won 16,000. I had a similar experience with Wheel of Fortune too that I'll talk about, but I think about it this way, and hopefully this helps alleviate for you too, and I'm sure you've thought about it too. If I had gone for it and I missed, I would have lost 15,000, and I think that would have sucked even more, and I would have been really upset about that.
And that's exactly, that's excuse me, that's honestly where I landed on it at the end of the day. I said, I looked at my situation. I only had one lifeline left, which was the double dip. I don't know if you remember the double dip. Okay.
Oh, yes.
So that was
you had to answer it if you used it.
You couldn't walk away after you use it. And I was like, I'm not even confident enough that I could take two guesses and feel like, oh, if I knock one out, it'll be the other. You know? And
I would have been the same way.
Yeah. And they don't even play them like that season. They didn't even play the music through the studio. All they played was the ticking of the clock.
Oh,
that's
God.
all you heard in the studio. So I was like, this is not going to happen. It's not going to happen. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I at the end of the day, I've sort of reconciled that. And honestly, I've had enough experiences in this world of game shows that I've had more than my fair share. It's been more than made up for. It is all good.
Same. Absolutely. I feel the same way. I may have recently done number 5, and so I feel like I just to be fortunate enough to be able to do this has been just a joy and just I consider myself fortunate because I know, like you, like not everybody gets the chance to do this that wants to do it. So yeah,
exactly. Gratefulness has been a big thing for me. 2006.
Yeah.
The year of Tim Sternberg. You had 2 appearances that year, Wheel of Fortune and 1 versus 100.
Yeah, that was crazy. So rewind a little bit. For a number of years, I went to Wheelmobile events, and the Wheelmobile, for those who are listening might not know, is Wheel of Fortune would go around the country in this big van and do these shows at different events. And so every time they came to South Florida, I would, go to the event, put my name in a drum, and hopefully hope that they would pick me, and I would go on stage and be excited and solve a puzzle and all that fun stuff that game show contestants do. And fast forward 2015, Wheel of Fortune was filming a couple weeks worth of episodes in Fort Lauderdale at the Broward County Convention Center. And I went to a local CarMax and filled out the drum, and luckily got picked to go on stage. Went wild and had a good time, and got invited to a finals audition, which took place at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino down here, where you would go in a room full of Wheel of Fortune hopefuls that also got the call, and play a mock game with a little wheel, and be excited, call letters, hopefully correct letters, good letters, buy vowels, and solve puzzles and have a good time. And then they would cut the group in half about after that, and then we would take a 16 puzzle test, and basically it's a bunch of puzzles that you have to fill in, and I did that as well, and got a call about 2 weeks later saying, hey, good news and bad news, we want you to come down to Broward County Convention Center, but you're going to be an alternate for the Fort Lauderdale tapings. But we're telling you right now, if you do that, we will definitely call you down to Sony at Culver City in Los Angeles to tape the show for real. So I had the opportunity, and a blessed opportunity, being a game show fan and a big Wheel of Fortune fan, to go as an alternate to Fort Lauderdale to the Broward County Convention Center. And I did the Fun in the Sun week. I was contestant number whatever it was, alternate. There were several of us alternates, and I got to watch everyone play and win money and have fun. I got a Sherry's Berries prize for a thank you for doing it. And then 2 weeks later I got a call saying, hey, we want you to come out to Culver City in February. And then I went out there and stayed at the Radisson and did all that fun stuff, and went on the show for real.
Amazing. So wait a second, that being able to see the show, knowing that if you get called up, great. If not, you're a shoo-in for not the real show, but the show in Hollywood,
in the actual studio. Yeah.
Did you see your presence at that first taping as any sort of advantage later down the road?
Definitely. I mean, I talked a little bit about the nerves for Millionaire and how it was taping my first game show. Being able to sit there and watch the entire process, and I'm all about process. I take mental notes of everything, and to be able to see how the names were drawn and how the places were, set, for the contestants. Wheel of Fortune, for those who don't know, draws names and numbers to see what place, what wedge you're sitting at from everything. Everything is a random process, basically, and to see how that went, it kind of alleviated my nerves. I was excited, to go to LA. The bonus is I got 2 name tags, as a result, and amongst other things. And, to see that as absolute advantage, I think it gave me some perspective and just to relax and have a good time.
Sure. I know that there's a bit of training that wheel contestants go through before they tape their episode. They bring everyone up and show them how to spin the wheel. Was that something that you got to do that first time as well?
Yeah, I remember Gary O'Brien, who was one of the contestant coordinators, showing us how to spin the wheel and don't get dragged with the wheel. And the wheel is very heavy. It did take a little bit of muscle. And yeah, I got to do it twice. I got to do it in Fort Lauderdale, which was cool because I got to be on the stage where, on the convention center. And then I got to, be fanboy out and be in the real studio and do it there. And have conversations with Charlie O'Donnell, rest in peace, and just enjoy the experience. And I am one of the fortunate people. I wasn't a fan favorite, but I'm one of the fortunate people that could say that I got to be in the studio twice for Wheel of Fortune.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is a privilege for sure. I have never seen Wheel of Fortune live, the actual TV show. I did see in quotes, Wheel of Fortune live when it was on tour a couple years ago.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
yeah. I saw it in Maryland with my buddy Corey. One of the things that I noticed as an audience member, and I wonder if you share this insight as well, that is a very hard show to be in the audience for. You realize just how much applause there is during the show. And your job is really to just clap when you see the wheel spinning. And the wheel spins, maybe 20, 25 times in the course of a show. There isn't a whole lot else to do. And I also saw that, and I don't know if, maybe maybe the TV audience has a different experience, but we were, maybe about 1,000 people in Maryland watching this puzzle, gradually fill in. We're trying to solve it, trying to figure it out. And in the context of that, also, oh God, the wheel is spinning. We have to clap. You know what I mean? There was something challenging about that.
Yeah. And you also, to add an aspect to it, you have to be quiet. You can't it's not like Price is Right, where you're yelling out prices. You have to be quiet. You can't yell out the answer.
Right. As much as you want to. I mean, that's part of watching Wheel of Fortune is like you see it. Oh, banana split. Like you just see it. Just say it out loud. You can't. Yeah. I was deathly afraid of saying something too loud that, they'd be able to hear it and it would ruin the game.
Exactly. And it is. I've seen a taping also after I taped the show a couple of years after we went back to LA and we went to a taping of the show. And yeah, there is that aspect of it that is quite, it's tiring. It's tough. It's not easy. And if they do a good job of keeping the audience hyped up to do that, I think. And to that point too, I've told someone recently, I think, out of the number of game shows that I've been on, I think Wheel is the toughest game show as a contestant, because you think about it. So you have a puzzle in front of you. You have to spin the wheel. And while you're spinning the wheel, you have to look at the puzzle to try to solve the puzzle. And then you have to calculate where your opponents are at. And there's a lot of moving pieces that are on that show that are not. And Jeopardy, I think, would be the same way, although I haven't been on Jeopardy. But, there's a lot that you have to kind of think about as the game is progressing. And there's a lot in 22 minutes to, kind of put together. And kudos to anybody who is very successful on Wheel. There's a lot to it. And there's a lot of luck involved, too. You can know all the puzzles, and there was a number of puzzles on my episode that I knew, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the luck with the wheel, or you have another contestant who just has all the luck with the wheel, your chances are minimal. And that's okay. That's what you sign up for too, to be on that show.
Sure. Yeah, that wheel is the equalizer when it comes to Wheel of Fortune. Yeah, absolutely. What was I just going to mention? Oh, there's also the used letterboard to keep track of, which by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the original used letterboard is in the current collection of the National Archives of Game Show History. I got to see it.
That's amazing.
I got to see it in person last year. It was one of the coolest things ever. It is in there.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, even keeping track of that, because when you play the game at home, there aren't many adaptations of the game that you can play at home where you're saying the letters out loud. My experience has always been either a computer game or a video game where you're going through a menu and selecting the letter that you want. You're going, I don't know, let's try N. You're not going N. And you're first of all, remembering to say it that loud.
You have to say it that loud. Yeah.
Right. Keeping an eye on that board, making sure you don't say something that's already, because you lose your turn. You lose your turn if you say a letter that's already been guessed.
Exactly. Your mind gets caught up, and we've seen it, right? We've seen many episodes of Wheel where contestants call a letter that was already there, and it's not because they don't know it, or it just like you said, and there's so many moving parts to the show. And, when you're thinking about it, you're thinking of what the contestant coordinators are saying. Enunciate the letter. Make sure you say it in a loud, clear voice. And all that's going on while you're trying to look at the puzzle and trying to think about what logically letters go where letters go. And there's so much that's involved with that it does. It's hard. It's hard not to call a letter that has been called already. So I give them all the credit. I don't poo-poo anybody who does that.
How did you do on the show? Did you win?
Yeah, I solved one puzzle. So the first toss-up was playing charades, and I said playing checkers with the letters that were showing. It was logical. So
sure,
that kind of bummed me out a little bit. But I solved the first regular puzzle, was turkey dinner with all the fixings, and I won $2,250, which was not an enormous amount, but it was more than the minimum. And the credit to the yellow. I was the red player. Credit to the yellow player, Linda Buford, who really dominated the game and won a lot of money, won the bonus round. And just, I always I look at it this way, time and place. She needed it more than I did. And she had a special needs son, ironically, at home. So, it really helped her in her life. And kudos to her for playing the best game she played. And I think that's an important aspect of being a game show contestant too, is the ability to be humble and understand that you're not always going to win at the end of the day,
Oh
but
yeah,
you're there to have a
sportsmanship.
good time.
Sportsmanship.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely.
I value that experience tremendously. I didn't do the best I could do, but I did the best that I could do, if that makes sense, based on what was happening. I mean, during the show, I landed on the mystery wedge. I picked up, got $10,000, but unfortunately, a couple of spins later, got a loser turn. So I mean, things happen, and you have to just roll with it.
Sure. And that's another show that, getting on Wheel of Fortune,
Iconic.
it's
Yes.
iconic. It's iconic. And
Yes.
getting on that show is the equivalent of winning the lottery. I mean, you
Not
take into
easy.
account, no, it's not easy. And just, difficulty aside, just the sheer odds. I mean, you look at the number of people that want to be on Wheel of Fortune versus the number of people that apply to be on the show, the number of people
Yes.
that they call back, the number of people that, you are part of a very, 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 very select group of people that have that privilege to be on the show. So, and it's a concept that comes up in a lot of the conversations I have on this show. Getting on the show is a prize in and of itself. Even if you don't walk
100%.
away with any cash, oh my God, that experience, you'll be able to get a
Yes.
free beer at any bar in the country. You know what I mean? That's an incredible experience to have under your belt.
Absolutely. And I just actually went to Las Vegas. We had they do a alumni slot tournament for Wheel alumni. This was the second year that they did it, and just to be amongst other alumni, you feel special. You're in this group. Yeah, I've done other shows, but I will say straight up, as Millionaire was iconic, but there is none other more iconic than Wheel of Fortune, and none other that I watched as a child growing up that I wanted to be on. So I definitely consider myself extremely fortunate to have had that opportunity to be on that show.
I'm so glad. And a lot of guests of mine were at that slot tournament. Tony Harrison, Christian
I love
Dixie,
Tony.
Fred
Yeah.
Fletcher Jackson, a lot of people that I've talked to.
Great people.
Yeah,
I had a great conversation with Fred. Yeah.
I was just talking to I was just talking to Fred on today's Wednesday. I talked to him on Monday. Yeah, I talked to him on Monday.
That's
and
amazing.
I was just telling him how much I enjoy talking to Wheel of Fortune fans. Like, of all the shows that are represented by the people that have been on this podcast, it's hundreds at this point. Wheel of Fortune fans, to me, are just like the most vibrant and colorful and fun group of people. And to see that camaraderie, like I've been seeing pictures from that slot tournament, it's just so much fun for you all, for you all to have that shared experience and to bond over that. I mean, again, talk about prizes that you don't hear about on the show. You know what I mean? The friendships that you make.
I was talking to Fred, I actually had a nice conversation with Fred at the tournament, and he's a huge game show fan like we are. And to hear he was interested in my Millionaire story, and to hear, my experience. And, I don't think there's any other contestant that's ever been put in a headlock by Pat Sajak like Fred has. So,
Oh, actually,
Oh,
it's a front-facing chicken wing.
That's right. That's funny.
If there's one thing I take from that conversation, is that it was not a headlock. It was a
I think he
front-facing
said
chicken
that
wing. That's right. It was a heel turn. That's what he called it.
That's what yeah. I remember him saying that yeah.
That's right. Oh, that's wonderful.
Funny.
That's wonderful. Hey, how did 1 versus 100 come about?
Interesting. It's funny. There's not a lot in my memory of that experience other than to tell you, I remember that there on the message board I was on, I think it was maybe one of the game show message boards I was on, they were talking about, they were making this brand new show, 1 versus 100, hosted by Bob Saget, and they needed a whole bunch of people to be in the mob and be contestants. And they had these open auditions where basically you showed up and you were picked to go on the show. And I was like, what the heck? My wife and I flew out to LA and we said, let's try this. Did this audition and got on the show. And I was a mob member, so I'm sure you remember this. The show is basically there's a 1 versus 100, and you're in front of this one contestant, and as soon as you miss a question, you're out. So I think I 3 or 4 questions in, I missed it and I was gone. That was it. And I had to wait for the contestant to finish, but that was the end of my experience. But it was a brief experience, but it was a fun experience. Didn't win any money, but had a good time. Was on another game show. I think I have exactly one still of the experience that I took from a screenshot, and I've never been able to find the episode that I was on. So yeah.
Well, you're on the right podcast, because I'm sure somebody listening has
I'm
it.
sure.
And not to mention the fact that you got to be on what I think is, of the game shows of that era, the most incredible set.
Oh, beautiful. Huge.
That massive wall of people. What number were you? Do you remember? Like, where on the wall were you?
I think I was 52. I have to look at I think I was 52.
Oh, you were like right in the middle.
Right in the middle, yeah.
Nice. Wow.
There I was in my Wheel of Fortune suit, and yeah, number 52.
Standard issue all-purpose game show suit.
Right. With the blue tie and the blue shirt,
right.
the whole deal.
And, just in case anyone listening doesn't have as strong a memory of 1 versus 100 as some of the more hardcore game show fans do, it was, like you said, it was one person playing against a mob of 100 people, and they were all in studio. Later, GSN did a version where everybody was on, like, via Zoom, which looked cool, but wasn't nearly as intimidating or interesting to look at as 100 people on this wall. And after a contestant gets a question right, they go to the mob to see who got it wrong, and the lights just kind of turn off one by one. It's very very dystopian, but I thought it was just such a beautiful set. I am envious of you being able to see that in person.
I do have, I told you my memories are sparse, but I absolutely have memories of walking out on that set for the first time and just seeing you think about Hollywood Squares on steroids, it's unbelievable how big this set was. And Bob Saget was a wonderful host. And for those who might not know, this show was done by the same producers as Deal or No Deal, and Deal or No Deal had already had a successful run at NBC, and they wanted to try something else. So that was kind of the next iteration, so to speak, from those producers.
Yeah, that was the summer of game shows with numbers.
Yes, exactly.
What do we have? We had Deal or No Deal. We had 1 versus 100. We had Identity. Remember Identity?
Oh, yes.
And Gillette.
So interesting you mentioned Identity, because I had sent in an application for that show. I was in the process, but I didn't get picked, which, in retrospect, I'm not so upset about it. But yeah, you literally had Identity. You had to look at a person and decide what they did for a living.
Right.
It's crazy.
I read something once that the original format for What's My Line was titled Occupation Unknown. And the format was strikingly similar to what eventually became Identity, 60 years later. But it was rejected by Mark Goodson because he thought it wasn't interesting enough.
Yeah, and clearly Identity didn't last long either. I think Penn was a good host. I just think it didn't, for whatever reason, didn't work. I mean, there was a lot of luck involved. It's very hard to determine what career people have necessarily just by looking at them, or hearing some things.
In closing, Tim, I would love for you to tell me what comes to mind when you think about that journey as a whole. I mean, we've said it a couple times here, but a person is super fortunate to have appeared on one game show, let alone several. And I imagine that experience, as incredible and humbling and exciting as it is, must have brought something to your life other than just those experiences. When you think about those experiences, what comes to mind as like the benefits that you felt in your life as a result of doing these things?
I think a life experience, just to know that I could accomplish something and do something that is exciting and fun, and actually take a childhood fantasy of mine and make it a reality. It was 17 years between 1 versus 100, and I was most recently on a Fox game show that didn't do so well called We Are Family, and just between that time period, just that's why I wanted to do it again. It's just because, it was something that was an escape from the ordinary. It gave me a jolt of just, listen, I did something fun, and now I have this videotape and now DVD that will last forever of this experience that I had, and just to kind of connect it to back to that 10-year-old kid Tim sitting at home watching NBC in the morning and seeing Sale of the Century and going, I think I could do that, and I did. I ended up doing it. So I think it's this level of bringing fantasy to real life.
Tell Us About Yourself, Conversations with Game Show Contestants, is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Christian Carrion, from my studio in beautiful downtown Lancaster City, Pennsylvania. Co-executive producer Cory Anotado. Researcher Chuck Donegan. This has been a production of BuzzerBlog, the most popular game show website in the world, in partnership with the National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. For more information, visit museumofplay.org. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Christian Carrion. Good night. Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutia of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury.